I am Alvin, 32 years old, and nothing prepares you for choosing a casket for your newborn. My son James lived 6 precious days before his tiny heart gave out. As I finalized funeral arrangements, my phone rang. It was Mom. Her words still haunt me. "We cannot come tomorrow. Bradley is having his pool party. It is just a baby. Your brother's party matters more." I buried my child alone while Instagram filled with photos of my family celebrating. They smiled and toasted by the water as I lowered my son into the ground. If you are watching this from somewhere, please like and subscribe as I share how I made them understand exactly what they had done before tragedy struck. My life with Rachel was everything I had ever wanted. We met at a mutual friend's birthday party 5 years ago, and from our first conversation about architecture and her work as a pediatric nurse, I knew she was special. Her compassion, intelligence, and warmth drew me in immediately. We married after 18 months of dating, in a small ceremony by the lake, where we had our first kiss. Our first 2 years of marriage were filled with adventure and joy. We traveled, renovated our small starter home, and built a life together that felt perfect in every way. When we decided to start trying for a baby, we assumed it would happen quickly. Rachel was only 26 then, and all our friends seemed to get pregnant the moment they decided to have children. But life had other plans. Month after month, the disappointment became harder to bear. We went through fertility testing, tried various treatments, and endured the emotional roller coaster that infertility brings. 3 long years passed with hope rising and falling in cruel cycles. Rachel and I supported each other through the tears and frustration, growing stronger as a couple despite the heartache. When Rachel finally called me at work one Tuesday afternoon, her voice trembling with excitement, I could barely believe it. The home pregnancy test showed positive, and blood work confirmed it days later. We were finally going to be parents. I remember falling to my knees in our living room, overcome with gratitude and joy. Our happiness existed against the backdrop of my complicated family relationships. Growing up, it was always clear that my younger brother Bradley was the favorite. 4 years younger than me, he received the praise, attention, and support that always seemed just out of my reach. While I worked summer jobs to save for college, my parents paid Bradley's full tuition. When I graduated with honors in architecture, they missed the ceremony because Bradley had a minor soccer tournament. The pattern continued into adulthood. My accomplishments were acknowledged with polite nods, while Bradley's smallest achievements warranted celebration. When I landed my first major project as lead architect, my parents responded with a quick, "That is nice, honey," before changing the subject to Bradley's new sales position. Despite this lifelong imbalance, Rachel encouraged me to maintain a relationship with my family. "They are still your parents," she would say, "and this baby will be their grandchild." With her support, I tried repeatedly to strengthen our family bonds. Especially after learning about the pregnancy, I called my parents immediately after Rachel's positive test, hoping the news of their first grandchild would bridge some of the distance between us. Mom answered, and her response was lukewarm at best. "Well, that is nice. Hope Rachel feels okay." Dad got on the phone briefly to offer a distracted congratulations before mentioning they needed to go help Bradley look at houses. He was considering buying his first home, which apparently warranted their immediate attention. By contrast, Rachel's family reacted with unbridled joy. Her parents, Tom and Linda, cried happy tears and showed up the next day with baby books, flowers, and home-cooked meals. They called regularly to check on Rachel and became a steady source of support throughout the pregnancy. As the weeks passed, Rachel and I immersed ourselves in preparations. We transformed our spare bedroom into a nursery, painting the walls a soft blue after learning we were having a boy. I built a crib by hand, pouring my love and hopes into every careful measurement and sanded edge. Rachel knitted tiny hats and booties, her face glowing with anticipation. We named him James Thomas, after my grandfather and Rachel's father. At night, I would talk to Rachel's growing belly, telling our son about the world, waiting for him, and all the adventures we would have together. Rachel would laugh as he kicked and shifted in response to my voice. Those quiet moments, just the three of us, felt sacred. At 20 weeks, we had a small gender reveal party. Rachel's family came early to help set up, bringing food and decorations. My parents arrived 30 minutes late and left an hour early, explaining they needed to help Bradley with some renovations on the house he had just purchased. When they were there, they spent most of the time on their phones, showing guests pictures of Bradley's new place and talking about his housewarming pool party he was planning for the summer. Still, I tried to include them in the journey. I sent weekly updates with ultrasound pictures and nursery progress. Mom occasionally responded with brief texts, while Dad rarely acknowledged them at all. When Rachel's baby shower came around, my mother attended, but spent much of the time talking about Bradley's recent promotion and how busy they were helping him prepare for his upcoming pool party. The contrast between our families became increasingly painful, but Rachel and I focused on the positive. We had each other, her supportive family, and good friends who shared our excitement. The nursery filled with thoughtful gifts, baby clothes, and books. We attended birthing classes and toured the hospital where Rachel would deliver. Everything was proceeding normally until week 30, when our world suddenly fell apart. It happened on a Thursday morning. Rachel woke up with severe abdominal pain and noticed spotting. I rushed her to the hospital, my heart pounding with fear as she squeezed my hand in the car. The emergency room staff took one look at her and moved quickly, wheeling her away for examination, while I filled out paperwork with shaking hands. The doctor's face was grave when he returned. Rachel had developed severe preeclampsia, putting both her and our baby at risk. Her blood pressure was dangerously high, and there were signs that the placenta was detaching. They needed to perform an emergency C-section to save them both. In the chaos of the moment, I pulled out my phone and called my parents. The call went to voicemail. I left a frantic message explaining the situation and asking them to come to the hospital. Next, I called Rachel's parents, who immediately said they were on their way. While waiting for a response from my family, I received a text from my mother. "Sorry to hear that. We are busy with preparations for Bradley's housewarming pool party this weekend. Keep us updated." No mention of coming to the hospital. No questions about Rachel's condition or the baby. Just an explanation of why they were too busy to be there during the most frightening moment of our lives. Everything happened so quickly after that. I was given surgical scrubs and brief instructions before being led into the operating room. Rachel lay on the table, tears streaming down her face as she reached for my hand. The medical team worked with urgent efficiency, and within minutes, they delivered our tiny son. James Thomas weighed just 3 pounds, 4 ounces. Instead of a robust newborn cry, there was a flurry of activity as the neonatal team worked on his small body. He was quickly transferred to an incubator and rushed to the neonatal intensive care unit. Rachel, still being treated for her dangerously high blood pressure, could only glimpse him as he was taken away. The next few hours passed in a blur as I moved between Rachel's recovery room and the NICU. Our son was beautiful but fragile, with translucent skin and a web of tubes and wires connecting him to machines that monitored his every function. The neonatologist explained that while premature, James was stable for now. His lungs were underdeveloped, and he needed assistance breathing, but they were cautiously optimistic. Rachel's parents arrived shortly after the delivery, their faces etched with concern and love. Linda sat with Rachel, while Tom accompanied me to see James. Rachel was too weak to visit the NICU that first day, so I took dozens of photos to show her. Tom put his arm around my shoulders as we stood looking at my son, offering the fatherly support I desperately needed but wasn't getting from my own dad. That evening, I tried calling my parents again. This time, my father answered. I told him about the emergency C-section and James's premature birth. His response was brief and distracted. That is too bad. Your mother is helping Bradley with the menu for Sunday. Can she call you back later? I explained that his grandson was fighting for his life in the NICU. But he merely repeated that they were very busy and would try to visit sometime next week. For the next 5 days, I existed in the strange limbo of hospital life. Rachel was discharged after 3 days, but remained weak and emotional. We spent every possible moment in the NICU with James. I learned to change his tiny diaper through the incubator ports and watched in awe as he wrapped his miniature fingers around mine. Despite his size and the seriousness of his condition, there were moments of hope. The nurses taught us kangaroo care, allowing us to hold our son against our skin for brief periods, which seemed to strengthen him. I continued sending updates and photos to my parents. They never visited. Each morning, I would check my phone for messages from them, only to find brief texts about how busy they were with Bradley's party preparations or questions about whether we would still make it to the party that Sunday. The disconnect between their priorities and our reality was staggering. On the 6th day, James took a turn for the worse. An infection had developed in his lungs, and his little body was too weak to fight it. Rachel and I stood helplessly by as the medical team worked desperately to save him. Machines beeped in alarm. Medication was administered, and prayers were whispered through tears. In the early hours of the morning, the neonatologist gently explained that James was not responding to treatment. The infection was overwhelming his system, and his organs were beginning to fail. All they could do now was make him comfortable and let us hold him in his final hours. Rachel and I took turns cradling our son, memorizing every detail of his perfect face. We told him how much he was loved, how brave he had been, and how he would always be part of our family. At 3:47 a.m., James Thomas took his last breath in my arms, leaving an emptiness that words cannot describe. The aftermath was a nightmare of paperwork, decisions, and overwhelming grief. Rachel collapsed emotionally, her body still recovering from the traumatic birth, while her heart shattered from the loss. Her parents took her to their home, where her mother could monitor her physical recovery while they all mourned together. For Rachel, the combination of postpartum hormones, physical trauma, and devastating grief proved too much. 2 days after James passed, she experienced a severe mental health crisis. Her parents rushed her to the hospital, where doctors recommended immediate psychiatric admission for postpartum depression complicated by grief. They explained that she needed intensive treatment to stabilize her and prevent potential self-harm. Left alone, I faced the grim task of making funeral arrangements for our son. The funeral home director was kind but uncomfortable, rarely having to help parents select a casket so small. I chose a white one lined with soft blue satin, the color we had painted his nursery. For his burial outfit, I selected the coming home outfit Rachel had carefully chosen months before, a tiny blue sleeper with embroidered stars and a matching hat. With Rachel hospitalized and unable to participate in the planning, I made decisions I never thought I would face alone. The cemetery plot, the minister, the obituary that contained more information about his death than his life. Each task was a fresh wound, a reminder of all we had lost and would never experience with our son. The funeral was scheduled for Sunday, the same day as Bradley's pool party. It was the earliest date available, and I needed to lay my son to rest so I could focus on supporting Rachel through her recovery. That evening, with a heavy heart, I called my parents to inform them of the arrangements. The phone conversation with my parents that Friday evening would forever change our relationship. I dialed their number with shaking hands, expecting that the death of their grandson would finally break through their indifference. My father answered on the third ring. "Hello, Alvin. We were just heading out to help Bradley set up for Sunday. Can this wait?" I took a deep breath. No, Dad, it cannot wait. James died this morning. I need to tell you about the funeral arrangements. There was a pause. Then a muffled conversation I could not quite make out. Then my mother came on the line. Oh, Alvin, we are so sorry to hear that. When is the service? Sunday at 11 in the morning at Oakwood Cemetery. The funeral home is handling everything. I just need you and Dad to be there. My voice broke slightly. Rachel is hospitalized for severe depression, and I cannot do this alone. Another pause, longer this time. Then my father took the phone back. Sunday? That is Bradley's pool party. We have been planning this for months. Everyone will be there. Cannot you reschedule it? The question was so absurd that for a moment, I thought I had misheard him. Reschedule a funeral? Dad, this is your grandson we are talking about. My son died. I need my family there. Well, we already committed to Bradley's event. We put down deposits and invited all our friends. You know how important this is for him. Christening his new home. My hands trembled with disbelief. More important than your grandson's funeral? More important than supporting your son who just lost his child? Then came the words that would echo in my mind for months to come. My mother took the phone again and said flatly, Alvin, it is just a baby. You only knew him for a few days. Your brother's party matters more. He has been planning this for months. Everyone will be there. We cannot back out now. The casual cruelty of her statement left me speechless. Tears streamed down my face as I tried to comprehend how my own mother could dismiss the death of her grandchild so callously. Mom, please. I finally managed to say, I need you there. I cannot do this alone. Rachel is in the hospital. Her parents are with her. I have no one. You are being dramatic, she replied. Babies die sometimes. It happens. You can always have another one. But Bradley only gets one first housewarming for his dream home. This is not about another baby, I shouted, my composure finally breaking. This is about James, your grandson, a real person who lived and died. This is about being there for me during the worst moment of my life. My father took the phone back. Keep your voice down, son. There is no need for hysterics. We are sorry about the baby. Truly we are. But we made a commitment to Bradley. Perhaps we can visit the grave next week. I hung up, unable to continue the conversation. Within minutes, my phone rang again. It was Bradley. Rather than offering condolences, he immediately launched into an attack. What the hell, Alvin? Why are you guilt-tripping Mom and Dad about my party? They have been helping me plan this for months. Everyone is coming, including potential business clients. You cannot expect them to drop everything because of this. This? I repeated, incredulous. My son died, Bradley. Your nephew. Yeah. And that is sad. But it is not like you knew him for very long. Mom and Dad already bought all the food and decorations for my party. They are helping host. You cannot expect them to just not show up. I ended the call without responding, too stunned and heartbroken to argue further. That night, I sat alone in our quiet house, surrounded by baby things we would never use, and cried until there were no tears left. The next day brought the painful task of explaining to Rachel's family why my parents would not be attending the funeral. Tom and Linda were shocked and angry on my behalf. That is unforgivable, Linda said, her voice tight with emotion. Absolutely unforgivable. Friends who heard about my parents' decision expressed similar disbelief. My college roommate Mark, who had flown in from Chicago to support me, was particularly outraged. I cannot believe they would do this to you, Alvin. Not even the worst parents I know would skip their grandchild's funeral for a party. That evening, I made the mistake of checking social media. My parents had posted several photos of themselves helping decorate Bradley's backyard. They were smiling broadly as they arranged lanterns around the new pool, with a caption that read, "Getting ready for the big day tomorrow. So proud of our Bradley and his beautiful new home." Bradley had posted too. "Final touches for tomorrow's epic pool party. Thanks to the best parents in the world for making it perfect. Tomorrow will be the greatest day ever. The greatest day ever. The day I would bury my son." I scrolled through dozens of photos. My mother arranging platters of food. My father setting up the sound system. Bradley showing off his new outdoor furniture. There were decorations and catering, and a professional bartender being installed. The scale of the event made it clear this was no ordinary housewarming, but an extravagant celebration. In one photo, I noticed a large banner that read, "Congratulations, Bradley," hanging over the pool area. My parents had commissioned a professional sign for my brother's party, but could not take a few hours to attend their grandson's funeral. Rachel's parents called from the hospital to check on me. Linda asked if I wanted her husband to stay with me that night, but I declined. I needed to be alone with my grief and the growing realization that my family's disregard went beyond mere thoughtlessness. This was a pattern of deliberate exclusion and disrespect that had persisted throughout my life. As I lay awake that night, scrolling through more party preparation photos, something shifted inside me. The raw pain of grief began to crystallize into something harder and colder. I had spent years accepting their treatment, making excuses for their behavior, and trying to maintain a relationship despite the clear favoritism. But this final betrayal was too much to bear. They had shown me exactly where I stood in their lives, and it was time I accepted that truth. But accepting it did not mean I would remain silent about it. For the first time, I began to consider how I might make them understand the consequences of their actions. Sunday morning arrived with a cruel brightness that seemed to mock my grief. The June sun shone in a cloudless sky. As I dressed in the black suit I had worn to my wedding, now repurposed for the worst day of my life, my hands shook as I fastened my tie. The same pale blue as the nursery walls, a small tribute to the son I had lost. Before driving to the cemetery, I visited Rachel at the psychiatric facility. The nurses had made a special exception to allow her a brief supervised visit with me before the funeral, though her doctors had advised against her attending the service in her fragile state. When I entered her room, the sight of her broke my heart anew. My vibrant, compassionate wife sat motionless by the window, her eyes vacant and rimmed with red. She had lost weight, and her hospital gown hung loosely on her frame. "I brought you these," I said softly, placing a small album of photos of James in her hands. "I thought you might want to see him today." Rachel nodded silently, opening the album with trembling fingers. We sat together without speaking, looking at the images of our son's brief life. When it was time for me to leave, she finally spoke. "Are they coming?" she asked, her voice barely audible. I did not need to ask whom she meant. "Number." They chose Bradley's party instead. A single tear slid down her cheek. "I always defended them to you." I was wrong. I kissed her forehead gently. "Rest and get better. I will be back after the service." And I will be back. The drive to Oakwood Cemetery was surreal. The funeral home had arranged for a procession, but with just a few cars, it hardly seemed worthy of the name. Rachel's parents' vehicle followed directly behind mine, with a handful of friends and colleagues trailing after. The hearse led the way, carrying a casket so small, it was nearly lost among the floral arrangements. At the graveside, I was struck by the physical setup. The funeral director had placed 4 chairs in the front row. One for me, one for Rachel that would remain empty, and 2 for my parents that would also remain unoccupied. Behind these were rows of chairs for the other mourners. The gap where my family should have been felt like a physical wound. Rachel's father, Tom, approached me before the service began. A tall, dignified man with gray at his temples. He had been a steady source of support throughout this ordeal. "We are here for you, son," he said, squeezing my shoulder. "Whatever you need today." And in the days to come, the service itself passed in a blur of hymns, scripture readings, and quiet tears. The minister, who had never met James, spoke in general terms about the tragedy of a life cut short and the faith that carries us through dark times. When it came time for me to speak, I approached the small podium next to the casket. "James Thomas lived for only 6 days," I began, my voice surprisingly steady. But in those 6 days, he was loved for a lifetime. He had his mother's nose, and what looked like might have been my chin. His fingers were perfect, right down to the tiny fingernails. He fought so hard to stay with us. I paused, looking at the empty chairs where my parents should have been sitting. There are many people who will never know James, who will never understand what has been lost today. But those of us here know. We know that the world is less bright without him in it. We know that there was supposed to be a first smile, a first word, a first step. There was supposed to be a lifetime of birthdays and Christmases and ordinary Tuesdays. My voice finally broke. Instead, we have 6 days of memories and a lifetime of wondering who he might have become. But he will always be our son, always be loved, and always be remembered by those who truly care. The small white casket was lowered into the ground. As the minister offered a final prayer, I dropped a single white rose onto the casket, then stood back, as others did the same. Rachel's mother had brought a small blue teddy bear, which she placed gently beside my flower. "Sleep well, little one," she whispered. Afterward, Rachel's parents had arranged a small gathering at their home for those who had attended the service. I went through the motions of accepting condolences and thanking people for coming. But I felt disconnected from everything around me, as if watching the scene from a great distance. During a quiet moment, I checked my phone. There were no messages from my parents or brother, not even a text acknowledging that their grandson's funeral had taken place. Instead, I found new social media posts appearing in real time. Bradley's pool party was in full swing. My mother had posted a photo of herself smiling broadly, standing next to my father and Bradley beside the pool. So proud of our amazing son and his beautiful new home. Best day ever. The timestamp showed it had been posted during James's funeral service. Bradley had shared a video of people laughing and diving into the pool, with the caption, "Party of the year. Thanks Mom and Dad for making it happen." Could not ask for more supportive parents. There were dozens of photos. My parents helping serve food, raising glasses in toast, hugging Bradley's friends, all while their grandson was being lowered into the ground across town. In one particularly painful image, my mother was cutting a large cake decorated with the words, "Congratulations, Bradley," while everyone around her applauded. As I scrolled through these images, something inside me hardened permanently. The grief remained, a hollow ache that I knew would never fully heal, but alongside it grew a cold, righteous anger. This was not just thoughtlessness or poor judgment. This was a deliberate choice that revealed the true nature of my relationship with my family. I put away my phone and returned to the gathering. Rachel's father found me standing alone on the porch. "You look like a man who has made a decision," he said quietly. "I have," I replied. "This cannot stand. Not this time." Tom nodded slowly. "Whatever you decide to do, Linda and I support you. Some things cannot be forgiven or forgotten." That evening, I returned to the hospital to see Rachel. Her doctors reported that she had been more responsive after my morning visit. When I entered her room, she was sitting up in bed, still pale but more present than she had been earlier. "How was it?" she asked, as I took the chair beside her bed. "Lonely," I admitted. "But your parents and our friends were there. The minister said some nice things. And your family?" I hesitated, then showed her the social media posts from the day. She scrolled through them slowly, her expression shifting from sadness to disbelief, to anger. All these years, she said finally, I told you to keep trying with them. I said family was important. I was wrong, Alvin. This is not family. This is not love. No, I agreed. It is not. What are you going to do? I took her hand in mine. I am going to make sure they understand exactly what they have done. Not for revenge, but for accountability. Some truths need to be spoken aloud. Rachel nodded, squeezing my fingers. We will do it together. When I get out of here, for the first time since James died, I felt a sense of purpose cutting through the fog of grief. My parents and brother had made their choice, prioritizing a pool party over the funeral of an innocent child. Now they would learn that such choices have consequences. In the days following the funeral, as Rachel continued her treatment in the hospital, I began to think clearly about how to address my family's betrayal. This was not about revenge or hurting them as they had hurt me. It was about accountability, about finally holding a mirror up to behavior that had been excused for far too long. Rachel and I had many long conversations during my daily visits to the hospital. Her mental health was improving gradually with proper treatment and therapy, and the psychiatrist was cautiously optimistic about her recovery. Our discussions often turned to my family and what form our response should take. Whatever we do, Rachel said during one of our talks, it needs to be based in truth. No exaggerations, no vindictiveness. Just the plain facts of what happened and why it was wrong. I agreed with her approach. The truth itself was damning enough without embellishment. With this principle in mind, I began researching and documenting the patterns of favoritism and neglect that had characterized my relationship with my parents throughout my life. I created a detailed timeline, starting with childhood memories and continuing through to the present day. The pool party incident was simply the culmination of a lifelong pattern, not an isolated event. I also started looking into my parents' business and social connections. They owned a successful real estate agency in town and had built their reputation on family values and community involvement. Their social media accounts were filled with charitable events and community service, presenting an image of caring, devoted parents and grandparents. The hypocrisy was striking. In one post from just a month earlier, my mother had written a lengthy caption about the importance of family support during difficult times, accompanying a photo of her at a charity event for a children's hospital. The disconnect between their public persona and private actions was stark. During my research, I discovered something else that added another layer to my understanding. My parents had been financially supporting Bradley in ways I had never known about. They had paid the down payment on his house, a fact carefully concealed in the property records, but revealed through some careful document searches. They had also invested heavily in his fledgling marketing business, acting as silent partners. This financial entanglement explained some of their devotion to him, but made their treatment of me even more inexplicable. I had never asked them for money as an adult, priding myself on my independence and success in my architecture career. Yet they had chosen to pour their resources into Bradley, while simultaneously neglecting even basic emotional support for me. As the pieces came together, I worked on drafting a letter that would lay out the facts clearly and unemotionally. Rachel reviewed my drafts during her better days in the hospital, helping me refine the language to ensure it remained factual rather than accusatory. The final version began with a simple statement of events: the premature birth of James, his 6 days of life, his death, and the funeral arrangements. It then detailed my parents' response, including direct quotes from our phone conversations and screenshots of their social media posts from the day of the funeral. The letter continued with a broader context of the pattern of favoritism and neglect, providing specific examples from throughout my life. It concluded with a statement that I was stepping back from any relationship with them until they acknowledged the harm they had caused and showed genuine remorse. 2 weeks after the funeral, with Rachel now discharged from the hospital and continuing her recovery at home, we finalized our plan. We would send the letter to extended family members, close friends of my parents, their business associates, and their church community. Not as an act of revenge, but as a matter of truth. "Are you sure about this?" Rachel asked as we prepared the envelopes. "Once we do this, there is no going back." "I am sure," I replied. "They have shown me who they are for 32 years. It is time." I believed them. We sent 27 letters by certified mail, ensuring they would be received and signed for. The same day, I published a carefully worded post on my own social media accounts, laying out the facts of what had happened and including screenshots of my parents' pool party posts, time-stamped during James's funeral. The response was immediate and overwhelming. My phone began ringing within hours of the letters being delivered. Extended family members called to express their shock and offer belated condolences. My Aunt Catherine, my father's sister, was particularly upset. "I had no idea, Alvin," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "They told everyone. The baby died, but the funeral was private and immediate family only. They were at that party, like nothing had happened. I would have been there for you if I had known." Online, my post spread quickly through our community. Friends and acquaintances shared it with comments expressing disbelief and support for Rachel and me. Several local business owners who worked with my parents' real estate agency reached out privately to say they were reconsidering their relationships with the firm. My parents' reaction was predictably self-centered. My father called first, his voice tight with anger. "What the hell do you think you are doing? Do you have any idea how this makes us look? You need to take down that post and send retractions immediately." "I have only stated facts," I replied calmly. "If the truth makes you look bad, perhaps you should examine your actions, rather than my reporting of them. This is slander. You cannot just air family business like this. It is not slander if it is true. And this stopped being just family business when you chose a pool party over your grandson's funeral." My mother called next, alternating between anger and attempts at manipulation. "People are canceling listings with us," she said accusingly. "The phone has been ringing all day with people asking if it is true. How could you do this to us? How could I tell the truth? The better question is, how could you skip your grandson's funeral for a party?" It was more than just a party. It was an important networking event for Bradley's business. We had clients there, and I had a dead child to bury, alone. The conversation ended with her threatening legal action, a threat I knew was empty. Everything I had written was factually accurate and carefully worded to avoid anything that could be construed as defamation. Bradley's response was the most aggressive. He sent a series of text messages calling me jealous, spiteful, and pathetic. He claimed I was trying to ruin his life because mine had not turned out as planned. The messages became increasingly threatening, culminating in a voicemail where he shouted that he would make me pay for damaging his reputation. Concerned about the escalating rhetoric, I consulted with a lawyer friend who reviewed everything I had published and the evidence supporting it. He confirmed that I had done nothing legally actionable and advised me to save all communications from my family in case their threats intensified. Within a week, the consequences of my truth-telling began to manifest. 3 major clients pulled their listings from my parents' real estate agency, citing concerns about their values. Bradley's business partner called me directly, asking for confirmation of the events before making a decision about their professional relationship. My cousin Mark, who worked for my parents, resigned from his position, telling me he could not in good conscience continue to be associated with people who would behave this way. Most significantly, their church pastor requested a meeting with them after receiving multiple inquiries from congregation members who had seen my post or received my letter. The church had always been central to my parents' social standing, and this scrutiny from their religious community hit them particularly hard. Extended family members began reaching out to me with their own stories of my parents' favoritism and Bradley's entitled behavior over the years. It seemed that many had noticed the pattern, but had remained silent out of family loyalty or a desire to avoid conflict. My Aunt Barbara, my mother's sister, called with a particularly revealing story. "When you were 10, she told me, I offered to pay for you to attend that summer architecture camp you wanted so badly. Your mother told me they had already enrolled you in something else. I later found out they had simply said no to you, while paying for Bradley's expensive soccer training that same summer. These stories confirmed what I had always suspected, but had tried to rationalize away. The discrepancy in how we were treated was not my imagination or misinterpretation. It was real, deliberate, and had been observed by others. As the weeks passed, my parents made several attempts to contact me, their tone shifting from anger to pleading as the social and professional consequences continued to mount. Bradley's business partner ultimately decided to dissolve their association, citing concerns about his character. My parents lost their position as chairs of the church fundraising committee, a role they had held proudly for years. "Please, Alvin," my mother said in one voicemail. "We need to talk about this. People are treating us differently. Some friends are not even speaking to us anymore." I did not return their calls. Rachel and I were focused on our own healing, attending grief counseling, and slowly rebuilding our lives in the aftermath of losing James. The accountability I had sought was happening naturally, as people responded to the truth with their own moral judgments. Then, 3 months after James's death, a family gathering loomed on the horizon. My father's parents were celebrating their 50th wedding anniversary, and a large celebration was planned. As the date approached, the calls from my parents increased in frequency and urgency. "You have to come," my father insisted in one message. "Everyone will be there. How will it look if you are not? Please, Alvin. We will do anything. Just tell people." This was all a misunderstanding. It was never about a misunderstanding, and we both knew it. But for the first time, I heard something in his voice that sounded like genuine fear. Not fear of financial repercussions or social embarrassment, but fear of having to truly face what they had done. Rachel, who had been making steady progress in her recovery, suggested that perhaps it was time to establish our terms. Not for reconciliation, which might never be possible, but for whatever limited interaction might be necessary in the future. "We should be clear about what we need from them," she said, as we discussed the anniversary event. "Complete acknowledgement of what they did, a genuine apology, and a clear understanding that things will never be the same between us." After careful consideration, I decided to return one of my mother's calls. When she answered, her voice was tentative, lacking its usual confidence. "Alvin, thank you for calling back. We have been so worried. I am calling about Grandma and Grandpa's anniversary," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "Rachel and I will attend, but we have conditions." "Anything," she said quickly. "Just name it. You and Dad will publicly acknowledge what you did. You will apologize sincerely, not just to us, but to everyone who was misled about the situation. And you will understand that this does not fix everything. It is just a first step." There was a long pause before she responded. "We can do that. We will do that. Thank you for giving us a chance, Alvin." "I am not doing it for you," I replied honestly. "I am doing it because the truth matters, and because Rachel and I deserve to move forward without this hanging over us. See you at the anniversary." As I hung up, I felt a strange mixture of emotions. Not forgiveness, certainly, and not even satisfaction. Just a quiet certainty that I was finally standing up for myself, in a way I should have done years before. The weeks leading up to my grandparents' anniversary celebration were marked by tentative attempts at communication from my parents. They called and texted regularly, their messages a strange mixture of pleading and passive-aggressive comments about the damage I had caused to their reputation. Bradley remained hostile, sending occasional angry texts, accusing me of destroying his business opportunities and social standing. Rachel continued to make progress in her recovery, though grief still visited us in waves. We attended a support group for parents who had lost infants, finding solace in sharing our experience with others who truly understood. Through these sessions, we learned that the path through grief is not linear, but moves in cycles, sometimes catching you unaware with its intensity. Even when you think you are healing, During one particularly difficult evening, after a support group meeting where a couple shared their experience of losing twins, Rachel turned to me with tears in her eyes. "I keep thinking about how your parents will never know what they missed," she said. "Not just James, but the relationship they could have had with us, with any future children we might have, all because they could not see beyond Bradley for even one day. That is their loss," I replied, holding her close. "We cannot make people value what they should. We can only set boundaries about how we allow ourselves to be treated." As the anniversary date approached, we prepared ourselves emotionally for the confrontation that would inevitably occur. The event was to be held at an upscale country club, with over 100 guests invited to celebrate my grandparents' 50 years of marriage. Rachel and I discussed our strategy carefully, agreeing that we would remain calm and factual, regardless of how my family reacted. The day of the celebration arrived with perfect early autumn weather. Rachel looked beautiful in a simple blue dress, her first formal outfit since losing James. Though still thinner than before, her eyes had regained some of their sparkle as she continued to heal. I wore a dark suit with a tie that matched her dress, a small act of unity as we prepared to face my family together. We arrived deliberately late, after most guests were already present. The tension was immediate and palpable as we entered the banquet hall. Conversations paused, and heads turned in our direction. My mother, who had been chatting with relatives near the entrance, froze mid-sentence when she saw us. My father, standing nearby with a drink in his hand, visibly paled. My grandmother spotted us and hurried over, embracing us both warmly. Unlike my parents, she had called repeatedly after James's death, devastated that she had not been told about the funeral in time to attend. "I am so glad you came," she whispered, squeezing my hand. "This family needs healing." The next hour was awkward, to say the least. Rachel and I moved through the crowd, accepting condolences from relatives who had learned the truth through my letters or social media post. My parents hovered anxiously at the periphery, clearly unsure how to approach us. Bradley was conspicuously absent, having apparently decided to skip the event entirely, rather than face me. During dinner, we were seated at a table with cousins, rather than at the family table with my parents. This arrangement suited me fine, allowing us to enjoy the celebration without immediate tension. My grandmother's brother gave a touching speech about enduring love and family bonds that brought tears to many eyes, including mine. As dessert was being served, my father approached our table hesitantly. "Could I speak with you for a moment?" he asked, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. Rachel squeezed my hand supportively as I rose to follow him to a quiet corner of the room. My mother joined us, looking nervous and slightly defensive. "We want to fix this," my father began awkwardly. "Tell us what you need us to do." "I already told you my conditions," I replied calmly. "Public acknowledgement, sincere apology, and understanding that things will never be the same. We can apologize privately," my mother suggested. "Just the family. No need to air everything in public." I shook my head. The damage was public. The healing should be too. My father sighed heavily. "Alvin, you have to understand our position. We had commitments to Bradley. The party had been planned for months, and James's death was inconvenient timing?" I asked, keeping my voice level, despite the anger rising within me. "Is that really the argument you want to make right now?" They exchanged uncomfortable glances. "That is not what we meant," my mother said quickly. We made a mistake. A terrible mistake. But dragging it out in front of everyone like this, you mean facing the consequences of your actions?" I interrupted. "That is what this is about. Not punishment, but accountability. You chose a pool party over your grandson's funeral. You told me, and I quote, 'It is just a baby. Your brother's party matters more.' Those words cannot be unsaid." My father looked genuinely distressed for the first time. We never thought. We did not realize how it would look. How it would look. I repeated incredulously. Not how it would feel for me to bury my son alone? Not the pain you caused Rachel and me during the worst moment of our lives? Just how it would look to others? My mother began to cry. Though whether from genuine remorse or frustration at being cornered, I could not tell. Please, Alvin. We are sorry. Truly sorry. What can we do to make this right? You can start by telling the truth, I said firmly. Right now. To everyone here. No excuses, no justifications. Just the truth. About what you did and a genuine apology. Then we can begin to talk about moving forward. They looked at each other uncertainly, clearly uncomfortable with my demand, but aware they had little choice. If they wanted any chance of salvaging our relationship, after a moment of silent communication, my father nodded reluctantly. All right, tonight, during the toast to your grandparents, I returned to Rachel, updating her quietly on the conversation. She took my hand in hers, her expression a mixture of apprehension and resolve. Whatever happens, she whispered, we face it together. When the time came for family toasts, my father approached the microphone after several relatives had spoken. He cleared his throat nervously, glancing at my mother who stood beside him. Before I offer my congratulations to my parents on their amazing 50 years together, he began, his voice slightly unsteady. I need to address something important. Many of you know that our family has been going through a difficult time recently. The room fell silent as guests sensed the unusual gravity of his words. My father continued, his discomfort visible but pushing through nonetheless. Our grandson, James Thomas, was born prematurely and lived for only 6 days before passing away 3 months ago. During that incredibly difficult time, my wife and I made a terrible decision. He paused, visibly struggling. We chose not to attend his funeral because it conflicted with our younger son's housewarming party. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. My father held up his hand to continue. There is no excuse for what we did. None. When Alvin called to tell us about the funeral arrangements, we told him that the party was more important. We even said, "It is just a baby." Those words were unforgivably cruel and entirely wrong. My mother stepped forward then, tears streaming down her face. We have spent a lifetime favoring one son over the other, she admitted, her voice breaking. It took this terrible mistake for us to see the pattern of hurt we have caused. We missed our grandson's funeral to attend a pool party. There is no justification for that choice. She looked directly at Rachel and me. We are deeply sorry for the pain we caused you both during the most difficult time of your lives. We failed as parents and as grandparents. We understand if you cannot forgive us, but we want you to know that we recognize the gravity of what we did and are truly, deeply sorry. The silence in the room was deafening. My grandmother wiped tears from her eyes, while other relatives looked shocked or uncomfortable. Rachel squeezed my hand tightly as we absorbed the public acknowledgement we had demanded. My father concluded simply, "We can only hope that with time and genuine effort on our part, we might begin to rebuild what we have broken. Thank you for allowing us to speak this difficult truth today." As they stepped away from the microphone, the tension in the room was palpable. Then, my grandfather, a man of few words but strong principles, stood up slowly. "Family means standing together in the hardest times," he said firmly. "Not just the celebrations. I am disappointed in the choices that were made, but I am proud of the courage it took to acknowledge them publicly. That is how healing begins." His simple statement broke the uncomfortable silence, allowing the event to continue. As people returned to their conversations, many glanced our way with expressions of sympathy or support. Bradley arrived late to the event, slipping in during the commotion following my parents' confession. When he saw me across the room, he hesitated, then approached with uncharacteristic uncertainty. "I heard what Mom and Dad said." He began awkwardly. "I had no idea. They told you it was just a baby." That was wrong. It was perhaps the closest thing to an apology I could expect from my brother. I nodded acknowledgement, but offered nothing more. This was not the time or place for a deeper conversation about our complicated relationship. As the evening wound down, my parents approached us again, their demeanor markedly different from earlier. My mother's carefully applied makeup was streaked with tears, and my father's usual confident posture was diminished. "Thank you for giving us the opportunity to begin making amends," my father said quietly. "We know this does not fix everything." "No, it does not," I agreed. "But it is a start. What happens next depends on your actions, not your words. Can we visit sometime?" my mother asked tentatively. "Just to talk?" Rachel, who had remained silent through most of these exchanges, spoke up. "We need time. This is still very fresh for us. But if you are genuinely committed to change, we can consider carefully rebuilding some form of relationship." They nodded, accepting this limited opening with visible relief. As we prepared to leave, my grandmother pulled me aside for a moment. "Your grandfather and I raised your father to be better than this," she said sadly. "I am sorry you had to be the one to teach him this lesson. But I am proud of you, Alvin, for standing up for yourself and for little James." Her words, simple but heartfelt, provided a measure of validation I had not realized I needed. As Rachel and I drove home that night, I felt a complex mixture of emotions: exhaustion from the tension of the evening, a strange sense of victory in finally being heard, and lingering sadness for all that had been lost. "Do you think they meant it?" Rachel asked as we pulled into our driveway. "The apology?" I considered the question carefully. "I think they meant that they are sorry for the consequences they faced. Whether they truly understand the depth of the hurt they caused, that remains to be seen." "What do we do now?" "We keep healing," I replied, taking her hand. "We set boundaries, and we see if they are capable of real change." It was not a perfect resolution, not by any means. But for the first time since James's death, I felt that the truth had been spoken aloud, and with it came the possibility of moving forward, whatever form that might take. 1 year passed since we laid James to rest in that small plot at Oakwood Cemetery. The seasons changed. Leaves fell and bloomed again. And slowly, painfully, Rachel and I found our way forward through grief. We marked the first anniversary of his birth and death with a small ceremony in the memorial garden we had created in our backyard, a peaceful space with a cherry tree, forget-me-nots, and a small stone bench where we could sit and remember. The relationship with my parents evolved into something I had never expected. Following their public acknowledgement at my grandparents' anniversary, they seemed genuinely committed to making amends, though the process was neither simple nor linear. We established clear boundaries from the beginning. No unannounced visits, no attempts to minimize what had happened, and no pressure to return to normal family dynamics. Our first meetings were awkward and tense, taking place in neutral locations like coffee shops rather than in our home, which still felt too personal, too sacred for their presence. My mother would bring small gifts, usually flowers or books about grief, her attempts at connection that I accepted with polite distance. My father, never comfortable with emotional conversations, would ask about my work or comment on current events, carefully avoiding any topic that might lead back to James or the funeral. Rachel, always more compassionate than me, helped guide these interactions, gently but firmly redirecting. When my parents seemed to be slipping into old patterns, "We need to acknowledge the elephant in the room," she would say when the conversation became too superficial. Pretending it did not happen does not help anyone heal. Gradually, as the months passed, something shifted. Perhaps it was the consistent effort my parents made to respect our boundaries. Or perhaps it was simply the passage of time softening the sharpest edges of our pain. Whatever the cause, our interactions became less strained, though never returning to what they had been before, which was perhaps for the best. Bradley's journey was more complicated. Initially, he avoided me entirely, apparently unable to face his role in the situation. When we did occasionally encounter each other at family events, he would nod acknowledgement, but keep his distance. It was only after he experienced his own significant setback, losing his business partnership and struggling financially for the first time in his life, that something seemed to change in him. 6 months after James's funeral, Bradley reached out with a text message that was surprisingly vulnerable. I never understood what it means to lose something that matters, until now. I cannot imagine what losing a child must be like. I am sorry for my part in making that worse for you. It was not a complete reconciliation, but it was a step towards something more honest between us. When we met for coffee the following week, he admitted that losing his business had forced him to confront his dependence on our parents and the unhealthy dynamics that had shaped all our lives. They did me no favors by making everything so easy, he confessed, stirring his coffee absently. I never learned to stand on my own. Now I have to figure it out, and it is harder than I thought. That is part of growing up, I replied, not unkindly. Most of us just do it a decade earlier. He nodded, accepting the gentle rebuke. I want to be a better brother, he said finally. I do not know exactly how, but I want to try. As for Rachel and me, our healing journey took unexpected turns. 6 months after losing James, we joined a support group for bereaved parents, finding solace in sharing our experience with others who truly understood the unique pain of losing a child. It was in those meetings, listening to stories of both loss and resilience, that we began to see a path forward that honored James's memory while allowing us to continue living. Grief does not end, said Marcus, a father who had lost his daughter to SIDS 3 years earlier. It changes shape. It becomes something you carry with you, rather than something that consumes you. His words resonated deeply with us, offering a framework for understanding our ongoing emotions without the pressure to get over our loss. We did not want to get over James. We wanted to find a way to carry him with us while still embracing life. In March, almost 9 months after James's death, Rachel discovered she was pregnant again. The news brought a complex mixture of joy, terror, and guilt. We sat on our bed, staring at the positive test, both crying for very different reasons. I am scared, Rachel admitted, her hand instinctively moving to her stomach. So scared of loving another baby and losing them too. I know, I said, holding her close. Me too. The pregnancy was classified as high risk due to Rachel's previous complications. Her doctor recommended extra monitoring and precautions, which we embraced wholeheartedly. Every appointment, every ultrasound, every milestone was approached with a mixture of hope and anxiety that only other lost parents could fully understand. When we shared the news with our families, the contrast to our previous pregnancy announcement was stark. Rachel's parents responded with cautious joy, immediately offering practical support while acknowledging our complex emotions. My parents, perhaps having learned from their previous mistakes, responded with appropriate enthusiasm tempered by sensitivity to our fears. We are here for whatever you need, my mother said, her voice careful but sincere. Doctor appointments, setting up the nursery, or just talking when things get overwhelming. It was the first time I had heard her make an offer of support without conditions or comparisons to Bradley. I accepted cautiously, setting clear expectations about what kind of involvement would be helpful and what would not. As Rachel's pregnancy progressed, we were confronted with countless reminders of what we had lost with James. Preparing the nursery was particularly difficult, as we debated whether to use any of the items we had lovingly selected for our first child. In the end, we created a space that honored James's memory while welcoming his sibling, incorporating a few special items like the handmade mobile I had crafted. While keeping most things new, my parents respected our decisions about the pregnancy and preparations, never pushing for more involvement than we offered. When Rachel's baby shower approached, My mother asked permission to attend, rather than assuming her right to be there. A small but significant shift in her behavior. In the final weeks of pregnancy, as Rachel's due date approached, our anxiety reached nearly unbearable levels. We had made it further than with James, but the fear of history repeating itself haunted us both. I found myself checking on Rachel multiple times during the night, watching her breathing and placing my hand on her belly to feel the baby move. When she went into labor at 39 weeks, everything proceeded normally, though the delivery room was crowded with specialists ready to intervene if needed. After 6 hours of labor, our daughter Lily Rachel was born, pink and perfect, and screaming with healthy lungs. The sound of her cry broke something open inside me, a dam of emotion I had been holding back throughout the pregnancy. As the nurse placed her in Rachel's arms, we both wept openly. Joy and grief intermingled in a way that would probably always characterize our parenting journey. This child could never replace James, would never be expected to fill the hole he left in our hearts. She was her own person, precious and complete, a new chapter rather than a replacement. When it came time to introduce Lily to our families, we established clear guidelines. Rachel's parents came first, spending an hour with their new granddaughter in the hospital room decorated with balloons and flowers. My parents came the following day, entering tentatively with a small stuffed animal and a photo album. "She is beautiful," my mother whispered, tears in her eyes as she gazed at Lily. "May I hold her?" I nodded, carefully transferring my daughter into her grandmother's arms. The moment was weighted with meaning, a tentative new beginning within the complex tapestry of our family history. "We will do better this time," my father said quietly, his hand resting lightly on my shoulder. "I promise you that." As the months passed and Lily grew, we settled into new routines and relationships. My parents visited regularly but always called first, bringing thoughtful gifts for Lily and occasionally meals for us. Practical support that acknowledged the challenges of new parenthood. They never tried to take over or impose their preferences. Instead, asking how they could help and following our lead as parents, Bradley became an unexpectedly devoted uncle, showing up with age-appropriate toys and offering to babysit when Lily was older. There was an openness to him now, a vulnerability that had been missing before his business failure forced him to reevaluate his life. On the first anniversary of James's death, all of us, including my parents and Bradley, gathered in the memorial garden for a simple ceremony. We planted new flowers, shared memories of those brief 6 days, and acknowledged both the pain of his loss and the growth that had come from it. "I wish we had known him," my mother said softly, placing a small stone painted with James's name beside the cherry tree. "I wish we had made different choices." "So do I replied honestly. "But we cannot change the past. We can only learn from it and do better now." That evening, after everyone had gone home and Lily was asleep in her crib, Rachel and I sat on the porch swing, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. "Do you think we have forgiven them?" she asked, her head resting against my shoulder. I considered the question carefully. I think forgiveness is a process, not a single decision. Some days I feel closer to it than others, but I do not think our relationships would be healing if we had not started down that path. "What is the biggest lesson for you?" she asked. "From all of this, that self-respect matters," I replied after a moment. "That accepting toxic treatment from family is not a virtue. That standing up for yourself and establishing healthy boundaries can actually improve relationships rather than destroy them." Rachel nodded thoughtfully. "For me, it is about the value of truth. Your parents lived in denial about their favoritism for decades. Bradley lived in denial about his privilege. You lived in denial about how unhealthy it all was. It took something truly terrible to break through all that denial and force everyone to see reality. And what about us now?" I asked, taking her hand in mine. "What truth are we living? That grief and joy can coexist," she said simply. "That we can love Lily completely while still missing James. That healing does not mean forgetting. As we sat together in the gathering dusk, Lily sleeping peacefully inside, and James's memorial garden visible from where we sat, I felt a sense of peace that had been elusive for so long. The pain had not disappeared, but it had transformed into something I could carry without being crushed by its weight. My family relationships would never be perfect, never be what I might have wished for as a child. But they had become honest, which was perhaps more valuable than perfect. My parents continued their efforts to make amends, not through grand gestures, but through consistent respect for our boundaries and genuine interest in our lives. Bradley was finding his own path to maturity, stumbling sometimes but making progress. And Rachel and I had discovered strengths within ourselves and our marriage that we never knew existed until they were tested by the worst pain imaginable. We had learned to speak truth, to set boundaries, to accept support, and to offer forgiveness without forgetting. James would always be our firstborn, always have a place in our family. His brief life had changed all of us in profound and lasting ways. And while I would give anything to have him back, to watch him grow alongside his sister, I had come to understand that honoring his memory meant living with integrity and intention. As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, I thought about all the parents watching this who might be struggling with their own family dynamics, their own grief, their own difficult boundaries. What would I say to them if I could? Perhaps simply this: stand in your truth, honor your pain, set your boundaries, and know that healing, while never perfect or complete, is possible even after the deepest wounds. If you have experienced family betrayal or loss, please share your story in the comments. How did you find your way forward? What boundaries did you need to set for your own well-being? Remember to like and subscribe if this story resonated with you, and know that wherever you are in your own journey, you are not alone. Thank you for listening, and may you find the strength to honor your own needs while creating the family relationships you truly deserve.